20 years changed everything, and 20 years changed nothing. Daquan kept his promise from the first moment he reached human space. He told everyone who would listen about the Ralathi who had saved him. He told the story at the inquiry board that investigated the Morning Star's engine failure. He told it at bars where spacers gathered. He told it to reporters who thought it was an interesting human interest piece. He told it to his family, his friends, anyone who would listen. They didn't have to help us, he would say, his eyes distant with memory. They could have passed us by. No one would have blamed them. We were strangers from a species they'd never worked with before. But they stopped. They saved us. They gave us parts worth more than my whole ship. And when I tried to pay them, they refused. They said maybe one day they'd need friends. Most people listened politely and moved on. Some thought it was a nice story, but nothing more. A few remembered. After 2 years of telling the story, they retired from active cargo hauling. He was getting older, and his wife wanted him home more often. But retirement didn't stop him from talking. He wrote a memoir that sold modestly well. He gave talks at the Terran Space Academy, where young cadets learned about navigation and diplomacy and a million other things they needed to know. Remember, he would tell these young people, space is dangerous, but it's also full of opportunities to do the right thing. The Ralathi taught me that. One day, they might need us. If that day comes, I hope you remember this story. Some of those cadets did remember. A young woman named Mira Song listened to Day's talk in 2251 and felt something stir in her chest. A sense of honor, of duty that went beyond just following orders. She wrote the story in her personal journal. Met Captain Daquan today. He told us about the Ralathi. If they ever call for help, I want to be there to answer. A man named Jin Tae heard the story from a friend who had heard it from Day himself. Jin was a scientist, not a fighter, but he understood the math of kindness. One good deed could multiply across years, across space, across species. He made a note in his files. Ralathi helped humans, expect nothing in return. Remember this. The story spread slowly, like seeds planted across human space. Most people forgot it after a few days or weeks. But some people remembered. Some people told the story to others. Some people believed that debts of honor mattered, even decades later. Meanwhile, the galaxy kept turning. Humanity expanded its territories slowly and carefully. New colonies sprouted on distant worlds. Trade routes grew longer and more complex. The Terran fleet grew stronger, building new ships to protect these expanding interests. Humanity was young compared to other species, but they were learning fast. In 2256, humanity made first contact with the Krynner Dominion. It did not go well. The Krynner were reptilian, cold-blooded in both biology and temperament. They stood 8 feet tall, covered in thick scales that could stop small-caliber bullets. They had built an empire across 40 star systems through conquest and intimidation. They believed in strength above all else. The weak existed to serve the strong. That was the natural order of the universe. When Krynner ships encountered human vessels for the first time, there was immediate tension. The Krynner saw humanity as weak, soft, emotional. Easy prey. Humanity saw the Krynner as bullies and aggressors. Several small skirmishes broke out along the border between their territories. Ships exchanged fire. A few were destroyed on both sides. War seemed inevitable, but it didn't come. Not yet. Both sides pulled back, watching each other warily. The Krynner had other concerns, other territories to conquer. Humanity wasn't ready for a full-scale war with such a powerful enemy. An uneasy peace settled over the border regions. Ships from both species gave each other wide berth. Diplomats sent cold, formal messages. Everyone knew the peace wouldn't last forever. The Krynner began expanding in a different direction, looking for easier targets. Their scouts probed the territories of smaller species, searching for weakness. They found many. Systems fell to the Dominion. Species were enslaved or exterminated. The Crinar machine of conquest ground forward, unstoppable. In 2263, Crinar scouts entered Ralathi space. The Ralathi had remained isolated for all these years. They traded with a few species, but maintained no alliances, no treaties, no military partnerships. Their technology was advanced, their few ships powerful, but they numbered so few. Only 3 billion of them across just 4 systems. They relied on their neutrality and their location far from major trade routes to keep them safe. The Crinar scouts saw something different. They saw advanced technology. They saw resource-rich worlds. They saw a species that stood alone, with no friends to call on, no allies to defend them. They saw easy prey. The Crinar began planning. They moved slowly, carefully. They probed Ralathi defenses, tested response times, mapped patrol routes. The Ralathi noticed these incursions and sent protests. The Crinar ignored them. What could the Ralathi do? They had no allies. No one to call for help. In human space, a new generation had grown up hearing the story of Daquan and the Ralathi. Most thought it was ancient history, a nice tale from the old days. But some people remembered. Commander Mirasong, now captain of her own destroyer, the Iron Wind, kept a copy of Day's memoir in her quarters. She had read it 5 times. Every time she faced a difficult decision, she thought about that story. About doing the right thing even when it cost you. Captain Jin Tae commanded an exploration vessel now. The Horizon's Edge. He had met Ralathi exactly once. During a brief encounter at a neutral trading station. They had been polite but distant, as always. Still, he remembered the story. He remembered the debt. There were others. Captain Sungrin of the heavy cruiser Valiant Dawn, Commander Biohayan of the carrier Thunderhead, Captain Hannah Baum of the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, hundreds of captains, thousands of crew members, all across human space. Some had heard the story directly from Day. Some had heard it second-hand or third-hand. Some had read about it in books or articles, but they remembered. In the back of their minds, in their hearts, they remembered. The Ralathi had helped humanity once, expecting nothing in return. They had saved human lives when they didn't have to. That meant something. In 2266, the Crinar decided they had learned enough about Ralathi defenses. They began moving their fleets into position, gathering their forces for a massive invasion. It would be swift and brutal. The Ralathi would never know what hit them. On Ralath Prime, the Ralathi homeworld, sensors detected the Crinar buildup. The Council met an emergency session. They analyzed the data, ran projections, calculated odds. The numbers were not good. The Ralathi defense fleet numbered only 60 ships. The Crinar were bringing at least 500. One council member suggested seeking allies. But who would help them? The Ralathi had no treaties, no agreements, no friends among the stars. They had kept themselves apart for so long. In the back of the council chamber, an old Ralathi named Thekiner sat and listened. He was ancient now, his shell cracked with age, moving slowly and painfully. He no longer captained a ship. He no longer traveled the stars. He served as an advisor, nothing more. Most of the council had forgotten he existed, but Thekiner remembered something. 20 years ago, a human captain had made him a promise. If your people ever need help, you call us. We don't forget our debts. It had seemed like an empty gesture at the time. A polite thing to say. Humans were weak then, their fleet small and inexperienced. What help could they possibly offer? But Thekiner had seen something in Captain Daquan's eyes. A certainty. A conviction. Something that made him think maybe, just maybe, the human had meant those words. 20 years was a long time. Humans probably didn't even remember. Why would they? The Relathi had helped one small cargo ship. That was all. It meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. Still, as the council debated their impossible options, Thickener made a decision. He was old. He was dying. He had violated Relathi protocol once to save strangers. Perhaps he could violate it one more time, that he would send a message to humanity. If they ignored it, nothing would change. The Relathi would fall to the Crinner either way. But if there was even a small chance that someone remembered, that someone cared, it was worth trying. In his quarters that night, Thickener composed a simple message. He kept it short, broadcasting it on all human frequencies, unencrypted so the whole galaxy could hear. This is Thickener of Relath Prime to the people of Terra, 20 years ago. We helped one of yours when no one else would. Captain Daquan and his crew. We asked for nothing in return. Now, we ask if you remember. The Crinner Dominion is at our gates. Our people face extinction. If you can hear this message, if you remember, we call you friends. He sent the message and sat back, exhausted. He expected nothing, hoped for nothing. He had no idea what was about to happen. Captain Daquan stared at the dead control panel in front of him. Nothing worked. No lights, no power, no engines. His small cargo ship, the Morning Star, floated in the darkness of space like a piece of garbage. Around him, his crew of 5 waited in silence. They all knew what this meant. How long do we have? Day asked quietly. His engineer, a young woman named Hana, checked her tablet. It still had some battery power left. Life support will last maybe 4 days. 5 if we're lucky and don't move around much. They nodded slowly. 4 days. They had been sending distress signals for 3 days already. No one had answered. They were too far from normal shipping routes, too far from any human colony. This sector of space was empty and dangerous. No one came out here except desperate cargo runners like him, trying to make extra money on risky routes. The engine had exploded without warning. One moment, everything was fine. The next moment, alarms were screaming and half the ship was on fire. They had put out the fires, but the damage was done. The main engine was destroyed. The backup engine was melted slag. They couldn't move. They couldn't go anywhere. Keep sending the signal, they said. Someone might hear us. But he didn't believe it. His crew didn't believe it either. He could see it in their eyes. They were going to die out here, alone in the dark. On the 4th day, when the air was starting to taste stale and wrong, something appeared on their sensors. Captain, Hannah shouted, suddenly excited. There's a ship. A ship is coming toward us. Everyone rushed to the windows. In the distance, they could see lights moving closer. A ship. Someone had heard them, but as the ship got closer, they felt his hope turn to confusion. The ship wasn't human. Its design was completely alien. Long and angular, with strange curves that hurt to look at. He had never seen anything like it. What is that? One of his crew whispered. They pulled up his database of known alien species. It took a moment, but he found a match. Relathi, he said slowly. They're called the Relathi. They're isolationists. They don't talk to other species. They don't help other species. They stay away from everyone. Then why are they here? Hana asked. They had no answer that the Relathi ship pulled, alongside the Morning Star. It was at least 3 times bigger than his small cargo vessel. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, Day's communication system crackled to life. Human vessel, a strange, clicking voice said in rough but understandable English. This is Captain Theckenar of the Relathi ship Wandering Path. We received your distress call. Do you require assistance? Day grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. Yes, we need help. Our engines are destroyed. Life support is failing. We're stranded. There was a long pause. Day could hear clicking sounds in the background, like the Relathi were arguing about something. Finally, Fekiner spoke again. We will render assistance. Prepare to receive our repair team. 2 hours later, Day stood in his cargo bay and watched the Relathi board his ship. They were unlike anything he had ever imagined. Tall, maybe 7 feet, with 4 arms and bodies covered in hard, shiny shells that looked like green and gold metal. Their heads were triangular with huge black eyes that seemed to see everything. They moved with quick, precise motions that reminded Day of insects that Captain Fekiner approached him. The Relathi captain was older than the others, with cracks in his shell and scars along his arms. He bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed formal and important. Captain Day Quan, Thickener said, "We will help you repair your vessel. My crew is already examining your engines." "Thank you," Day said, feeling emotion choke his words. "Thank you so much. We thought we were going to die out here. But I have to ask, why are you helping us?" "Everyone says the Relathi never help other species." Thickener's huge black eyes studied him for a long moment. "This is true. We do not involve ourselves in the affairs of others. We maintain our isolation. We follow our protocols. Then why?" They asked. "Because," Thickener said slowly, "all life deserves a chance to continue its journey. Today, I choose to violate my people's protocols. Perhaps I am old and foolish. Perhaps I will be punished when I return home. But I cannot leave thinking beings to die when I have the power to save them." Over the next 7 days, the Relathi crew worked on the Morning Star. They shared their food, which tasted strange but was edible. They shared their water. They gave Day's crew spare parts and technology that was far more advanced than anything humans had. The Relathi engineers worked alongside Hana, teaching her things about engine design that human scientists didn't even know yet. They tried to talk to Thickener several times, wanting to understand this strange captain who had saved them. Thickener was quiet and formal, but he answered Day's questions. He told stories about Relathi culture, about their love of art and mathematics, about their belief that the universe was a vast equation still being solved. "We are few in number," Thickener explained one evening. "Perhaps only 3 billion of us in all of space. We are cautious because we must be. One wrong war, one bad decision, and we could be wiped out forever. That is why we remain isolated. That is why we avoid entanglements with other species." "That sounds lonely," they said. Thickener made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Yes, very lonely. Perhaps too lonely." On the 8th day, the repairs were complete. The Morning Star had power again. Her engines hummed with new life, actually running better than before the explosion. They approached Thickener one last time. "How much do we owe you?" "Name your price." "Whatever it is, I'll find a way to pay it." Thickener raised one of his 4 hands in a gesture of refusal. "There is no price. We helped because it was right to help. That is enough." "But you gave us so much," they protested. "Your technology, your time, your resources. Consider it a gift," Thickener said. "Perhaps one day, the Relathi will need friends. Today, we make one." They felt something fierce and powerful rise in his chest. He stepped forward and held out his hand. Thickener looked at it curiously, then carefully wrapped 2 of his long, segmented fingers around Day's palm. A handshake between 2 different species, 2 different worlds. "If your people ever need help," Day said, his voice hard with certainty, "you call us. You call humanity. We don't forget our debts. We don't forget our friends." Thickener bowed deeply. All 4 arms crossed over his chest in what Day somehow knew was a gesture of great respect. "I will remember your words," Captain Daquan, Theckener said. The two ships parted ways. The Morning Star limped toward the nearest human outpost. The wandering path disappeared into the darkness of space, returning to whatever mysterious business the Ralathi conducted in the shadows. Between stars, they stood at his window and watched the Ralathi ship go. Next to him, Hana smiled. "We're going to tell everyone about this, aren't we?" she asked. "Everyone," they agreed. "The whole damn galaxy needs to know. The Ralathi saved us when they didn't have to. That means something. That means everything." He didn't know then that his words would echo across 20 years. He didn't know that his promise would be tested in fire and blood. He only knew that he owed a debt, and humans always paid their debts. Always. The Krynner invasion fleet arrived at Ralathi space exactly on schedule. 500 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls painted in the blood-red colors of the Dominion. War leader Varak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and watched the Ralathi homeworld grow larger on his screens. This would be easy. The Ralathi had perhaps 60 ships defending their space. Good ships, with advanced technology, but hopelessly outnumbered. They would fall within days. Maybe hours. "Begin the assault," Varak ordered. The Krynner fleet moved forward like a red tide. Ralathi defense ships rose to meet them, spreading out in a thin defensive line that everyone knew wouldn't hold. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space with brilliant flashes of energy weapons and exploding missiles. The Ralathi fought well. Their ships were fast and their weapons accurate. But there were too few of them. For every Krynner ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Within 6 hours, the Ralathi defense fleet had been cut in half. 30 ships destroyed or crippled. The survivors fell back toward Relath Prime, trying to protect the homeworld. On the surface of Relath Prime, Theckener watched the battle through orbital sensors. His people were dying. His world would fall. The Krynner would enslave or exterminate every Ralathi alive. He had sent his message to humanity. But where were they? Had they changed their minds? Had it all been empty promises? Then, at the edge of the star system, something appeared. The sensor operator's voice shook with emotion. Ships. Multiple ships entering the system. I'm reading. 200, 300, 400 contacts. On every Ralathi screen, every monitor, every tactical display, new icons appeared. Human ships. Hundreds of them. And they were broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Admiral Myra Song of the Terran Defense Fleet to all Ralathi vessels. We have arrived. Hold the line. Help is here. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a formation that shouldn't have been possible. These were ships from dozens of different commands, different fleets, different purposes. Destroyers and carriers, cruisers and frigates, science vessels and medical ships. Even civilian transports modified with whatever weapons their crews could bolt on. They should have been a chaotic mess. But somehow, impossibly, they moved as one. Mira stood on the bridge of her destroyer Iron Wind and stared at the tactical display. The Krynner fleet was massive, larger than she had expected. Her hands were sweating inside her gloves, but her voice was steady. All ships, this is Song. Form battle line Delta 7. Science vessels and civilian craft, fall back to defensive positions. Medical ships, prepare to receive casualties. Combat vessels, weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends. Captain Jin Tae, aboard the Horizon's Edge, heard the order and pulled his exploration ship back to the second line. He wasn't a fighter, but he could provide sensor data, help coordinate movements, maybe use his ship's advanced scanners to find weaknesses in the Krynner formation. Captain, Hanabom positioned her medical frigate Mercy's Hand at the very back of the human formation, near Relath Prime itself. No weapons, no shields worth mentioning, but she had operating theaters and medicine and people who knew how to save lives. That was her weapon. The Krynner fleet turned to face this new threat. War leader Vorak studied the human formation and laughed. Humans, he sneered. They actually came. Fools. We outnumber them. Our ships are larger. Our weapons are stronger. They will die alongside the Relathi. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. This is War Leader Vorak of the Krynner Dominion. You have no treaty with the Relathi. You have no obligation to them. Withdraw now, and we will let you live. Stay, and we will destroy you along with these insects. Myra heard the message and felt cold anger settle in her stomach. She opened her own channel, broadcasting to both fleets. This is Admiral Song. We have no treaty with the Relathi, that's true. But we have something better. We have honor. 20 years ago, they saved human lives when they didn't have to. They expected nothing in return. Now they need us, and we're here. That's what being human means. That's what honor means. In the back of the human formation, on a small patrol ship, old Daquan listened to Myra's words and smiled. He was strapped into a gunner's seat, his arthritis screaming in his joints, but he had never felt more alive. That's my girl, he whispered. Tell them what we're made of. Vorak's laughter cut across the channel. Honor? Sentiment? These things are weakness. The strong survive. The weak perish. That is the only truth in the universe. Another voice came across the channel then, old and clicking but clear. Theckener, speaking from Relath Prime. War Leader Vorak, the ancient Relathi said, you believe strength is all that matters. You believe isolation and cruelty make you strong. But you are wrong. The humans have something you will never understand. They remember kindness. They value loyalty. They keep their promises. That is true strength. That is why you will lose. Vorak's response was to open fire. The Krynner fleet surged forward, every ship firing at once. The space between the two fleets filled with weapons fire. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds, everything both sides had. The human fleet answered with everything they had. The battle was chaos. The iron wind weaved through enemy fire, its smaller size making it harder to hit. Mira directed her ship's weapons with precision, targeting Krynner engines and weapon systems rather than trying to destroy the massive ships outright. Around her, other human destroyers did the same, using speed and coordination to compensate for their smaller firepower. Commander, Beohyan's carrier Thunderhead launched wave after wave of fighters. Small, fast attack craft that swung around the Krynner capital ships like angry insects, targeting weapon ports and sensor arrays. The Krynner had fighters too, but they weren't prepared for the sheer aggression of the human pilots. One pilot, a young woman named Yoon-Hae, screamed into her radio as she dove her fighter straight at a Krynner cruiser, firing her missiles at the last possible second before pulling up. For the Relathi. For Captain Day. For everyone who keeps their promises. Her missiles struck true, crippling the cruiser's main guns. Captain Jin-Tae, in his science vessel, used his advanced sensors to map the Krynner fleet's communication network. He found the command nodes, the ships coordinating the attack, and fed that data to the combat vessels. All ships, this is Horizon's Edge. I'm sending you targeting priorities. These ships are their command structure. Take them out, and they'll lose coordination. Human ships adjusted their fire, focusing on the targets Jin had identified. The Krynner formation began to fragment, losing the tight coordination they had started with. But the Krynner were powerful. Human ships were dying too. The destroyer Swift Justice took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. The cruiser Morning Light lost half its hull to a Krynner dreadnought's main guns and had to retreat. A civilian transport that had volunteered for the fight was cut in half by missile fire, its crew dying before they could even scream. On the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, Captain Hannah Baum and her staff worked frantically. Injured crew members were flooding in on escape pods and shuttles. Burns, broken bones, radiation poisoning, decompression injuries. Her operating theaters were full. Her corridors were full. She was running out of supplies and out of beds, but she kept working. Every life saved was a victory. The Ralathi, seeing the humans fighting and dying for them, rallied. The remaining 30 Ralathi ships threw themselves back into the battle with renewed fury. They targeted Krynner ships that were firing on human vessels, protecting their unexpected allies. Theckener watched from the surface and felt something he had never expected to feel, hoped on the Crimson Fang. War leader Vorak watched his tactical display with growing frustration. The humans should have broken by now. They were losing ships. They were outgunned. But they weren't retreating. They weren't even slowing down. They just kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying for a species that wasn't even their own. It made no sense. It violated every rule of warfare. Understood. You fought for territory. You fought for resources. You fought for survival. You didn't fight for sentiment. You didn't die for honor. Pull back the flanks, he ordered. Concentrate fire on their capital ships. Break their command structure. The Krynner fleet adjusted, focusing overwhelming firepower on the larger human vessels. The battlecruiser Defiant took hit after hit, its shields failing, its hull breaching. The crew fought to save her, but it was too much damage. The captain gave the order to abandon ship, but before the crew could evacuate, the Defiant's captain, a man named Sung Rin, made a decision. His ship was dying anyway, but maybe it could still be useful. All crew, evacuate now, he ordered. I'm staying. Captain, no. That's an order. Get out. Everyone out. His crew fled to the escape pods. When the last one had launched, Sung Rin sat alone on his bridge and plotted one final course. He aimed his dying ship directly at the Crimson Fang Vorak's flagship. Then he pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiant, burning and broken, accelerated like a missile toward the Krynner command ship. Vorak saw it coming too late. He tried to order evasive maneuvers, but the Defiant was too close, too fast. The human battlecruiser slammed into the Crimson Fang at near light speed. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a new sun. When the light faded, the battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of continuous fighting. 3 days of ships exploding, people dying, weapons firing until they overheated and failed. 3 days of human and Ralathi crews pushing themselves beyond exhaustion, beyond pain, beyond fear. With war leader Vorak dead, the Krynner fleet fractured. Different commanders gave different orders. Some wanted to retreat. Some wanted to press the attack. Some wanted to break off and regroup. The tight, coordinated assault became a chaotic brawl. The humans and Ralathi pressed their advantage. Admiral Mira Song had barely slept since the battle began. Her eyes were red, her voice hoarse from giving orders, but she kept going. The iron wind had taken damage to its port side. The shield generators were running at 60%, and they were almost out of missiles. But her ship was still fighting. Target that dreadnought, she ordered. All batteries fire. The Iron Wind and 5 other human destroyers concentrated their fire on a Krynner dreadnought that was hammering a Ralathi cruiser. The combined firepower overwhelmed the dreadnought's shields. Explosions rippled across its hull. The massive ship listed to one side, its engines dying. The Ralathi cruiser it had been attacking broke free and limped towards safety. On the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, Captain Hannah Baum had been operating for 72 hours straight. Her hand shook with exhaustion. Her scrubs were covered in blood from a dozen different species. She had lost count of how many surgeries she had performed. A nurse approached her between operations. "Captain, you need to rest. You're going to collapse." "After this one," Hana said, looking down at the burned Ralathi soldier on her table. "After I save this one." The nurse knew better than to argue. She just handed Hana another stimulant injection and helped prep the next surgery. Captain Jin Tae's science vessel Horizon's Edge had become the fleet's eyes and ears. His sensors mapped the battlefield, tracked enemy movements, identified threats before they could materialize. His crew worked around the clock, feeding data to the combat ships. But on the second day of fighting, a Krynner missile got through. It didn't destroy the Horizon's Edge, but it crippled the main sensor array. Jin made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Get me a repair team," he ordered. "I'm going outside." "Captain, we're in the middle of a battle, and we're blind without sensors." "I'm going." He put on a spacesuit and went out onto the hull of his ship while weapons fire streaked past in every direction. For 2 hours, he worked to repair the damaged sensor array, his hands cramping in the cold, his heart pounding every time an explosion flared nearby. But he got it working. When he climbed back inside, his crew stared at him like he was insane. "Sensors back online," he said calmly, like he hadn't just repaired equipment in the middle of a war zone. "Get me those targeting solutions." The civilian ships surprised everyone. They had no right to be there, no training for this, no weapons worth mentioning. But they stayed anyway. Transport Captain Su Min flew her unarmed ship straight into the battle zone again and again, rescuing crews from disabled vessels, delivering ammunition to ships that had run dry, carrying wounded to medical frigates. On her 5th run, her ship took fire. The hull breached in 3 places. Half her crew died instantly. But she kept flying, kept rescuing, kept delivering supplies. When someone asked her why she didn't retreat to safety, she just shook her head. The Ralathi didn't run when Captain Day needed help. "I'm not running either." And old Day Kwan himself, strapped into a gunner's seat on a small patrol ship, fired his weapons until his hands were numb and his eyes could barely focus. He was 67 years old and had no business being in a war. But every time he pulled the trigger, every time his shots found their target, he thought of Thekna, thought of the Ralathi captain who had saved his life 2 decades ago. "This is for you," he whispered with each shot. "This is for keeping me alive. This is for teaching me what honor means." On the 3rd day, something broke in the Krynner fleet. Maybe it was the casualties. Maybe it was the loss of their leader. Maybe it was the sheer, impossible stubbornness of the humans who simply refused to quit no matter how many of them died. The Krynner began to retreat. It started with 1 ship, then another, then entire squadrons. They disengaged from the battle and fled toward the edge of the system. The humans in Ralathi pursued them, but not too far. Everyone was exhausted. Everyone had taken damage. When the last Krynner ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel, a strange silence fell over the battlefield. For a moment, no one spoke. No one could quite believe it was over. Then Admiral Myra Song's voice came over the fleet-wide channel, shaking with emotion. "All ships, this is Song. Cease fire. The battle is won. Relath Prime is saved. Well done, all of you. Well done." Cheers erupted across every human ship. Crew members hugged each other. Some cried. Some just collapsed in exhaustion. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had actually done it. The cost had been terrible. 47 human ships destroyed. Over 3,000 humans dead. Another 5,000 wounded. Entire crews wiped out. Ships that would never fly again. The Ralathi had lost 30 more ships in the battle. Their defense fleet was effectively destroyed. Thousands of Ralathi soldiers and civilians were dead, but Relath Prime stood. The Ralathi people survived. And they survived because humanity had answered their call. On the surface of Reloth Prime, Thekener stood in the planetary command center and watched the human ships in orbit. His ancient body ached with exhaustion, but his heart felt something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, certainly. Wonder, absolutely. But something more than that. "Bring me to the surface port," he told his aides. "I must meet them." They tried to argue that he was too old, too weak, that he should rest. He ignored them all. 2 hours later, shuttle after shuttle began landing at Reloth Prime's main spaceport. Human captains and crew members coming down to the surface. Some were wounded. Some could barely stand. All of them had fought for 3 days straight. Thekener stood at the landing pad and waited. His forearms trembled slightly, but he stood straight. The first shuttle to land carried Admiral Myra Song. She stepped out, her uniform scorched and torn, her face exhausted but proud. Behind her came Captain Jin Tae, Captain Hannah Baum, Commander B.O. Hyan, and dozens of others. And from a small patrol ship in the back, old Daquan emerged, supported by his wife. He was bruised and battered, barely able to walk, but he had a huge smile on his wrinkled face. Thekener saw him and felt his heart break with joy. He walked forward on unsteady legs, crossing the landing pad to meet the human captain he had saved 20 years ago. "Captain Daquan," Thekener said, his voice cracking with age and emotion. "You came. You actually came." Day reached out and took Thekener's hand in both of his. "I told you we would. I told you humans don't forget." "You brought them all," Thekener said, looking at the other captains gathering around them. 300 ships. Thousands of your people. Many died for us. Why? We are not your species. We have no treaty. We offer you nothing." Myra stepped forward and bowed respectfully to the ancient Relothi. "You saved Captain Day when you didn't have to. That was enough. That was everything. But the cost," Thekener protested. "So many of your people died. So many ships destroyed. Was it worth it for us?" Jinte spoke up, his quiet voice carrying across the landing pad. "Every life is worth saving. Every species deserves a chance to survive. You taught us that 20 years ago. We're just returning the lesson." Thekener looked at all of them, these humans who had crossed the galaxy to save his people. Young and old, military and civilian, all united by a single promise made 2 decades ago. "I do not understand you," he said softly. "We are few. We have little to offer. We cannot repay this debt." "You don't need to," they said gently. "That's the point. You helped us because it was right. We helped you for the same reason. No debt, no payment. Just friends helping friends." For the first time in recorded Relothi history, one of them cried in public. Tears ran down Thekener's angular face as he bowed deeply. All 4 arms crossed over his chest in the highest gesture of respect his species knew. "Then the Relothi are honored to call humanity friends," he said. "Forever. For all time. This debt we cannot repay, but we will remember. Always." The Relothi Council convened that evening and made a unanimous decision. For the first time in their species' history, they would form an alliance. The Human Relothi Alliance, founded not on treaties or trade agreements, but on mutual respect and honor. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Other species heard the story with disbelief. Humanity had gone to war for a species they barely knew, based on a single act of kindness from 20 years ago. They had lost thousands of lives, spent billions in resources, risked war with the powerful Krynner Dominion. For nothing. For no strategic gain. For no territory or resources. Just for honor. The story became legend. Across 100 worlds, people told the tale of the humans who kept their promises. Species that had thought humanity weak or naive suddenly saw them differently. The Krynner Dominion, bloodied and humiliated, marked humanity as a species never to underestimate. And in human space, the survivors of the battle were welcomed home as heroes. Memorial services were held for those who died. Their names were carved into monuments. Their stories were told, and the message reached human space at exactly 0347 hours, Terran Standard Time. It came through every communication channel simultaneously. Military frequencies, civilian broadcasts, emergency bands, entertainment networks, everything. At the Terran Defense Command Center on Mars, a junior communications officer named Lee Yuna nearly fell out of her chair when the message started playing. She had heard the story of Daquan and the Ralathi. Everyone had heard it at some point. But hearing it was one thing. Hearing a desperate plea from the Ralathi themselves was something completely different. She recorded the message and sent it up the chain of command immediately. Then she did something that would get her reprimanded later. She also sent it to every captain in the fleet database. Every single one. She figured they deserved to know. Within minutes, the message was everywhere. On the destroyer Iron Wind, Captain Mira Song was reviewing supply reports when the message came through her personal comm. She listened to it once, then again, then a third time. Her hands were shaking. 20 years ago, she had been a cadet listening to an old cargo captain tell a story. She had written in her journal, "If they ever call for help, I want to be there to answer." She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Her executive officer, Commander Park Jun, looked up in surprise. "Captain?" "Plot a course for Ralathi space," Mira said, her voice hard as iron. "Maximum speed." "But Captain, we don't have authorization. We're on patrol duty. We can't just—" "Did you hear the message?" Myra interrupted. "Yes, but then you know what we have to do. Plot the course, now." Park stared at her for a moment, then smiled slowly. "Yes, Captain. Plotting course now." 3,000 light-years away on the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge, Captain Jin Tae was conducting a survey of an asteroid field when the message arrived. He was a scientist, not a soldier. His ship had some defensive weapons, but nothing serious. It was designed for research, not combat. He listened to the message 3 times, just like Myra had. Then he called his crew together. "You all heard it," he said. "The Ralathi are in trouble. They're asking for help." His crew looked at each other nervously. One of them, a young engineer named Quan Su, spoke up. "But sir, we're not a warship. What can we do against the Krynner Dominion?" "I don't know," Jin admitted. "Maybe nothing. Maybe we'll just be one more target for them to shoot at." But 20 years ago, the Ralathi didn't ask what they could gain by helping humans. They just helped. Now it's our turn. He paused, looking at each face. "I'm going to Ralathi space. Anyone who wants to come with me, I'll be glad to have you. Anyone who wants to take a shuttle to the nearest station, I'll drop you off first. No judgment either way. This isn't a military order. This is a choice. Nobody move toward the shuttles." "Course is plotted, Captain," his navigator said quietly. Jin nodded, feeling something fierce and proud burn in his chest. "Take us there." The same scene played out across human space. Hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members, each one making the same choice on the carrier Thunderhead. Commander Biohyam listened to the message and immediately ordered his ship to prepare for combat operations. His superior officer called him within minutes, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. "I'm going to help the Ralathi, sir," Bio said calmly. "You don't have authorization." "I know, sir. Court-martial me if you want. After I get back." He cut the communication before the Admiral could respond. On the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, Captain Hannah Baum heard the message and immediately began loading her ship with every medical supply she could fit. Her ship had no weapons at all. She would be completely defenseless in a combat zone. She went anyway. People are going to get hurt, she told her crew. Someone needs to be there to patch them up. At the Terran Fleet Academy, instructors played the message for their students. Many of those students immediately requested permission to graduate early, to get their commissions now, to join whatever fleet was forming. Most of those requests were denied. The students protested. Some went anyway, stowing away on ships or borrowing training vessels. On dozens of civilian stations, transport captains and cargo haulers heard the message. They weren't military. They had no weapons. They had families, businesses, lives that didn't involve getting shot at. But many of them remembered the story too. Some had even met Daquan over the years, heard him speak, shaken his hand. A transport captain named Su Min listened to the message in her quarters. She was supposed to be hauling agricultural equipment to a new colony. Safe, boring, profitable work. She sat there for 5 minutes, thinking. Then she called her crew. "Change of plans," she said. "We're going to Ralathi space. Load medical supplies instead of farm equipment. As much as we can carry. Captain, we'll lose the contract. The company will fire us. Then they fire us. I'm going. Anyone who wants to leave can do so now." A crew of 12 stayed. Within 6 hours of the message being sent, over 100 human ships had changed course toward Ralathi space. Within 12 hours, it was 300. Within 24 hours, it was close to 500. The Terran government was in chaos. Nobody had ordered this mobilization. Nobody had authorized it. But it was happening anyway, driven by individual choice rather than command structure. The Prime Minister called an emergency meeting of her cabinet. They argued for hours about what to do. Some wanted to order the ships to return immediately. Some wanted to court-martial every captain involved. Some wanted to officially support the mission. In the end, they made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. The Prime Minister went on every broadcast channel, her face tired but determined. "My fellow humans," she said, "you've all heard the Ralathi message by now. You've seen our ships mobilizing without orders. Some have called this mutiny. Some have called this madness. I call it something different. I call it honor. 20 years ago, the Ralathi saved human lives when they had no reason to do so. They expected nothing in return. They asked for nothing. But now they're asking. And our people are answering. As of this moment, I am officially declaring that humanity stands with the Ralathi. Any ship that wishes to render assistance has my full authorization. Any captain who answers this call will not be punished. Any crew member who volunteers will be honored. We cannot order our military to fight in a war that hasn't been declared. But we will not stop them from answering an oath of honor. We are humans. We pay our debts. We keep our promises. And we don't abandon our friends. To the Krynner Dominion, I say this. The Ralathi are now under Terran protection. Attack them at your own risk." The message sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Other species watched in confusion and disbelief. Humanity was mobilizing its entire fleet for a species they had no treaty with, no trade agreements with, no strategic benefit from protecting. It made no sense. The Krynner War leader, a massive reptilian named Vorak, intercepted the human transmissions and laughed. Humans were young, naive, foolish. They had perhaps 600 warships total. The Krynner Dominion had over 2,000. This would be a short war. "Let them come," Vorak told his subordinates. "We will crush the Ralathi and these upstart humans at the same time. It will send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Weakness is death. Isolation is death. Sentiment is death." On Ralath Prime, Thekiner watched the human response with growing amazement. He had expected nothing. hoped for very little. But hundreds of human ships were coming. Hundreds. All because of one rescue 20 years ago. A young Relathi council member approached him, her shell still bright and uncracked with youth. "Advisor Thekenar," she said, "the humans are coming. All of them. Why? We have no treaty with them. We offered them nothing. Why would they risk war with the Crinner for us?" Thekenar thought back to that day 20 years ago, to the look in Captain Daquan's eyes when he had made his promise. He had known then that there was something different about humans, something that couldn't be calculated or predicted. Because, Thekenar said softly, they are humans. They remember kindness. They honor debts. And apparently, they keep their promises even when it costs them everything. Far away, on a small colony world, an old man named Daquan sat in his modest home and watched the news broadcasts. He saw the ships mobilizing. He saw the government's declaration. He saw hundreds of captains saying the same thing he had said 20 years ago. We don't forget. Tears ran down his wrinkled face. He was 67 years old now, officially retired, with a bad back and worse knees. He had no business going to war. He grabbed his coat anyway. His wife found him an hour later at the local spaceport, trying to convince a patrol ship captain to give him a ride. "Hey," she said gently, "you can't go. You're too old. Let the young ones handle this." He turned to her, and she saw the same fire in his eyes that had been there 20 years ago when he'd first come home and told her about the Relati. "I made a promise," he said simply. "Thekenar saved my life. Now I'm going to save his." She sighed, knowing she couldn't stop him. "Then I'm coming with you? Someone needs to keep you from doing something stupid." The patrol ship captain, a young woman named Ko Yoon, had been listening to the whole exchange. She smiled. "Welcome aboard," she said. "Any friend of the Relathi is welcome on my ship." The fleet was gathering. The response had been given. Now came the hard part. Now came the war.